So, hi everybody, I'm Holly Rosen-Fink from Neighbors for Refugees. I'm so happy for all of you to be here tonight with me and Kerry Brodie from Emma's Torch. She's a very special guest. I've been wanting to talk to her for a long time, so we're all in for a big treat. I want to tell you a little bit about Kerry before we kick off my conversation with her. She's a graduate of the Institute of Culinary Education, where she won the Westhoff Award for Leadership and was named ACCSC Graduate of the Year. She holds a master's in government from Johns Hopkins University and a bachelor's in Near Eastern Studies from Princeton University. She founded Emma's Torch in 2017 and was named one of City and State 40 Under 40 in 2018. I can't believe it's only been a few years. How amazing. Refugees, asylees, and survivors of human trafficking from over 35 countries have passed through her kitchen. And so in a moment, you're going to meet Kerry. But before you do, I want to remind everyone very briefly about our format. We'll be together for the next hour or so, and we'll be muting you so there's no background noise. And in the second half of our session, we'd like you to all ask Kerry questions. We want this to be interactive. So as she speaks, if you have something to ask, you can either write it down or you can put it in the chat box and just wait to ask her in person. And we are recording this so you and all of us can share it with friends and family. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Kerry Brodie. Kerry, thank you so much for coming. The first thing I want to ask you is just tell us about Emma's Torch in like a couple sentences. And we're going to dive way, way into it in just a moment. But just let's start with what is Emma's Torch?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all so much for including me in this. It's always fun to get to talk about this, these challenges, this moment in history that we're in. So Emma's Torch, we're a nonprofit social enterprise. And what we do is that we provide culinary education and job readiness and job placement services to refugees, asylees, and survivors of human trafficking. And as a social enterprise, we do this through our own in-house businesses. And the business's only goal is to be a training ground for our students, so that when our students graduate, they have had experience in our cafe at the Brooklyn Public Library, in our catering business where we cater weddings and galas, and they've also worked at our restaurant in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Of course, now that COVID has happened, I'm sure we'll get into it, that experience looks a little different and the interaction with food is different. But what hasn't changed is that our priority and our focus is always on how can we best prepare our students and our graduates to access the workforce and to take complete ownership over their career journeys.
Great, thank you. And what led you to start Emma's Torch? What was your inspiration?
So it's funny to me, I was thinking about this and preparing for our conversation tonight, that it's been almost 5 years since the most important conversation of my life. And I tease my husband that few people can say that the most important question they were asked by their spouse was not, will you marry me? But instead was, why not you? And this all came about because I was working in public policy. I was really passionate about the work. I got to work with incredible people. But what I realized was that the thing that was most meaningful to me, the thing that I thought about constantly, was the interactions I was having with people at a homeless shelter that I would volunteer at a couple times a week on my way into the office. And the conversations led me to this really nuts idea that what happens if we didn't think about handing out food as a means of giving somebody calories so they can get through the day, but instead thought about it as a means to solving larger structural problems. And I thought it would be so cool if someone did this, and how great would it be if I could go work with them. And eventually my husband, I guess, got kind of sick of me talking about how cool it would be for someone else and asked me why I couldn't be that person. I was really moved by, there is that photo in 2015 of that little boy, Alan Kurdi, whose body was washed up on the shores of Greece. And I had, and I'm sure, I know millions of people around the world had that same reaction of, but by the grace of God go I. Like, that could be me. That could be my child. That could be my cousin. And this idea of, it was very frightening to me at the time, and I didn't realize how much more frightening it would be, that people weren't saying, throw open the doors, welcome in the stranger. And so I thought that this could be a way of not just impacting the individuals that we work with, but actually working with them to send a message that says, when we welcome in the stranger, we are stronger and better and more delicious in a small way. So that's how I went on this journey.
So so you had this great idea. How did you develop this business? How did you didn't come from a culinary background. You did go to culinary school, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny to me because I think right now I can say it was this great idea and I had a vision and I just knew. I did not. I had no idea. I was a 25-year-old kid, very well intentioned. I will say that I had heart was in the right place, but there's a lot of well-intentioned people out there. And so I said, okay, let's find out why this wouldn't work. And so I went out and I spoke to experts. I reached out to the highest people I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. So the people who worked at highest. I spoke with the IRC. I spoke with some local shelters. I spoke with asylum seekers. I spoke with refugees. I spoke with survivors of human trafficking. And I spoke with restaurant owners to say, I have this idea. I think it's crazy. Do you think it's crazy? And more importantly, do you think it solves a real problem? Because if it doesn't, then let's move on. There's no space for false solutions. Let's hone in on something that really works. And eventually, after months and months of taking these meetings and phone calls and writing up notes, I ended up leaving my job in May of 2016 and deciding that if I was really going to do this, I'm very fastidious and I like schools and learning. I decided to go to culinary school to make sure that whatever I was asking of people, I could do as well. And more importantly, there's always going to be something that goes wrong. I didn't want there to ever be a moment where I couldn't fill a void or a gap. And believe me, I've played dishwasher. I have been culinary instructor. Thank goodness I am not anymore because our chef is light years ahead of me on that. But just making sure that when it is all hands on deck, I could contribute.
Wow, that's incredible. How long did that take you?
So I was in culinary school for about 8 months, I think. Mm-hmm. It's an 8-month program that involves 6 months of class time where I was working part-time and in class part-time. And then you do it's called an externship where you go work in a restaurant. And I had the genius idea that I would do a baking shift because that way I could do baking from 5 a.m. until 3 p.m. And then I would have the rest of the day to work on Emma's Torch. It was not my finest idea I've ever had.
Early on, did you get investors or partners and to help launch this business?
So we're a nonprofit. So every dollar that comes in is philanthropic other than the earned revenue. And I think that one of the things that we benefited from early on was the idea that we didn't have a lot of funding. And so everything was really done incrementally and with an understanding of every dollar has to be stretched to its max, which is still an attitude that even today when we have a lot more wiggle room, it served us well. It's why I think in many ways we're in the position we are today because we've always had to run lean. Our very first thing that we did was I wanted to get a pilot program launched. So we worked with 3 students. The person I'd hired to teach did not show up. So it was me teaching for 3 weeks, just an 18-hour prep course. And we had a big launch party that we all cooked together. And the money that we raised from that event, which wasn't a lot, was all of the money we had to open the pilot. But from there, things started coming together. And we were fortunate that when we did take on our first pilot location, we had a cafe for 6 months. That was our first trial run. It was very quickly apparent that the earned revenue side was going to be strong, that the food really could stand on its own merits. Mm-hmm. And we were able to cultivate really strong relationships with potential funders who later turned into the people who have kept us where we are today.
Do your students become alumni? Do you keep in touch with them over the years? Do you follow their journey? You do?
We do. We joke that, so one thing that I didn't know about restaurants, because you read or you I don't know if anybody's read Kitchen Confidential or you hear these stories, and there's definitely horrific things that happen in the industry. But restaurants also cultivate this sense of family and sense of community So much so that actually what's mandated is that everybody has to have a meal together every day, and it's called family meal. And so when our students graduate, they graduate from Emma's Torch, but they're still part of the Emma's Torch family. And I always felt that to be true, and I kept in touch with our students, and we talked, and we actually, one of our alumni named his daughter Emma after Emma's Torch. But and so baby Emma and my daughter, like, they were great. But during the pandemic, we actually started doing for all of our alumni online classes. And especially in the beginning, we would do classes 6 days a week. And it wasn't just about learning, it was also about sharing. One of our students made masks for everyone. Another student had said, you know, oh, I got too many groceries this week, who can I cook for? And that sense of place, it allows us to, of course, keep in touch with the students, see how they're doing, how we can help, but also to see how they help one another, and they've created their own community.
Tell us about the curriculum, like what is the process? Sorry, I just fell. Yeah, tell us about the curriculum and the journey for each of your students from start to finish. They have to fill out an application, right?
Yeah, so the way it starts is even before they fill out that application. We work with about 40 partner organizations, refugee resettlement agencies, church groups, synagogue groups, families who have heard of us, people who read about us in the paper, who say, oh, I have someone who I think might want to do this program. And so they fill out an online application, and we do an interview. And what we're looking for in the interview is not nice skills. We don't care. If you love to cook, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who's saying, I really want to do this. I want to invest in myself. And that's important, because what we offer our students is a full-time job as a member of this program. So from day one, when our students are sitting and doing English or math class or practicing interviews, they're being paid so that this can be the thing that they invest in 100%. Mm-hmm. And I like to brag about this, because I think it's our team that really does this work, but it's because of that our job placement rates before COVID were pretty close to 100%. Mm-hmm. And perhaps more importantly, our job retention was up there in the 80 percentile, compared to that's not normally the case in culinary jobs. Our students were finding not just jobs, but careers, because we gave them the chance to invest in themselves. And so the curriculum is made up of, it used to be, pre-COVID, it was a 15-week curriculum because it would rotate through different locations. Now we've parsed it down to 10. It's 40 hours a week. 1 day a week is on what we call personal development. And so it's everything from those English classes to how do you set career goals? How do you learn to mitigate challenges in the kitchen? Because that's something that comes up a lot of, if you have a bad interaction with someone you work with, how do you handle that when you don't speak the same language? And then the other 4 days are spent working in the restaurant that we've turned into a cafe. And what they're doing there is making cafe food and service for the neighborhood, but we're also preparing 600 meals a week for a local shelter through a program with Rethink. And we're also launching consumer packaged goods that we're shipping nationwide, which is a new experience for us. But what's been really fun about that journey is it's an opportunity to show our students how you can launch a packaged food business, which is something our alumni and our students are really interested in. So I bet that this will give wings to a bunch of those ideas and initiatives as well.
You're giving them such amazing opportunities. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. You're setting them up for life. How do you make these connections for them to go out and get jobs? How does that work? Do you have people that help? Do you help connect them with the chefs around New York City?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's something super interesting that for me was like mind blowing, because I had a very conventional upbringing. I didn't realize that it's actually not about what you know a lot of the time. It's who you know and who's going to vouch for you. And that's definitely the case in the culinary industry. And so the approach that we take is that we teach our students, how do you apply for a job? How do you submit a resume? All of those pieces. But for that first job out after they graduate, our culinary director, Alex Harris, who used to work at Union Square Hospitality Group, helps, and all of us at this point have cultivated, we work with 40 or 50 restaurants. Unfortunately, some of them have closed since because of COVID, but we work with that network of restaurants, not just to get our students job interviews, But way before that, we're sending them on mock interviews and mock in the kitchen in culinary industry using mock trails, which is when they basically spend a day in the restaurant, so that our students are not just thinking about it in terms of who wants to hire me, but more, where do I want to go? And while that job market's does look very different now, and every week we're notified about more of our favorite restaurant partners who are forced to shut down for now. We think they'll be back. We still want our students to take that approach, that you should have the ability to make a choice like that. And we're confident that we can continue to do that.
A lot of them come from, they all have their own history. They've suffered trauma. What kind of conversations do you have with them about the places where they've come from? And do you help them with any problems that they currently experience?
It's very interesting. Yeah, I look at our students, and we call them students because it's very important for us that when they walk through the door, they realize that whatever they want to bring with them into the space is their choice. Mm-hmm. We're not asking them, and something that I so appreciate in one of our conversations, Holly, this recognition of, we don't have any rights to somebody else's story. We don't have any rights to their pain, but we do have the opportunity to be there for them. And so what we found is that some of our students, for them, it's actually exceptionally powerful to just have a time and a space where who they are is a student learning to cook, and they don't want to talk about anything else. And then we also have instances where our students really do want to share, and they want to talk about what they've overcome and what it means to them. And so our students come from over 40 different countries. They run the gamut from 18 to 65. But I will say that there is one common thread, is this really unending, and especially now, like, unwavering sense of optimism. Our students have a very firm belief that they are looking towards something better. And to me, that just gives me a lot of hope that if they can take that approach, especially knowing that the types of things they have been through and experienced, then I have no excuse to be grouchy.
Is when you say they're experiencing current wave of optimism, is that because of the election, or is that because they're in America?
So I don't think it's the election. I mean, I have to be very careful about what I, as Kerry Brodie, can say versus me on behalf of Emma's Torch, because we're a nonprofit.
Fair enough. We can.
I'll say, but no. I think that, but I do think there's an important nuance. I think there's something there that, for our students, the sense of optimism is unwavering. Like, it's shocking to me. So when we had to shut down the restaurant, we invited all our alumni basically to say, like, please raid our fridge. We were ready to, we serve a couple hundred people a day at the library. We have, 100 people every day for brunch at the restaurant. Like, come take food. And they showed up. And I'm like trying not to cry, because I have just had to end my life. I'm feeling very sorry for myself. Yeah. And they're not sad. They're hopeful. One of them said to me that they're really excited they had the chance to see other people today, and they can't wait to come back. Mm-hmm. And they asked me if I was okay. What I will say is that they're not unaware. It doesn't come from like a Pollyanna-ish denial of reality. Mm-hmm. One thing that in particular was very concerning was we were working with students to make sure they could get unemployment, especially when there was the additional $600 a week. We pay our students on the books, so they're totally eligible for it. And a lot of them were worried because of the president and his tweets that were not legally coherent, what that would mean for their asylum cases. And so there is a very large sigh of relief when we see things like the president-elect proposing 125,000 refugees being allowed in, and perhaps more importantly, increasing the oversight in the process for asylum and for family reunification, since a lot of our students have been separated from their families, are waiting for their wives and their children to come over. So definitely, I think we're looking towards better days in that front.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, very carefully stated. Thank you. Well, you mentioned the pandemic a few times. Clearly, it's top of mind. It can't be easy to have any type of business, whether it be nonprofit or for-profit right now. During the course of this pandemic, do you stay in touch with the students that when their time got cut off and that are coming back, do you have former students come to you and said they need help or they're experiencing hard times?
Yeah, so in March, we basically shut down everything, and then very quickly realized that instead of shutting down, let's just do it online. But we didn't want to teach, we couldn't do the Emma's Torch experience for our new students online. Instead, we said, everybody who's ever done anything with Emma's Torch, here's the Zoom link, here's our schedule, show up, come chat with us. Mm-hmm. And it's been a really beautiful time to spend a lot of time with a lot of our alumni, and then to have follow-up phone calls with them. One of our graduates called me the other day and just said, Kerry, I'm starting a business. Is that good? And I said, that sounds great. Like, do you want me to talk to you about it? Like, what? No, she just wanted me to know. I was like, okay, like, that's like, here are some resources, let's talk about it. But what we did was as soon as we realized that there was a way for us to reopen safely, as long as we're not doing indoor dining, we just don't believe it's safe. We brought back the students whose time had been cut short. We brought them back to start over. And so we started one group mid-October and another group in the middle of this month. But the other thing, and I mentioned earlier that we're so lucky to have all these community partners. Emma's Torch isn't allowed to re-grant money. It's not part of our mandate through the IRS, so there's legal issues there. And so at first I felt really helpless. Like, how can I help our graduates? It's all great that I can help them with like getting on unemployment, but that's a many months process. And so Neighbors for Refugees and so many others were proactively reached out to us about supporting our graduates. And so we were able to secure a lot of funding, direct funding for our students, food security, food access very, very quickly. And that we ended up compiling all of these different available resources in multiple languages, not just for our graduates, but actually we were able to share these with other organizations so that they could use it for their clients and students and participants. So it was really I think the pandemic has taught us in many ways that we're responsible for one another, and some of those ways can feel sad and scary about transmission. I think the other side is true too. We have such a capacity to do good for one another, and that's been really beautiful to see.
That's really beautiful. Well, I mean, we were so happy to help, to work with you and help some of your students. So thank you for letting us. And now I come to a very special point of our conversation with Kerry. I am going to show some pictures and she's going to tell us stories, and we get to see some of her food. So let me share my screen.
I love our students. This is from a few days ago. So this is Umu and Amadou, who are from two different cohorts. Usually we stand farther apart, but this is a moment for a picture, but we are pretty careful in this. Umu had joined our program previously. She has two children. Actually, her daughter and my daughter have the same name, so we always trade Sophia stories, and they're close in age. And she's from Guinea. She's an incredible mom and is trying very hard to build a new life after so much. And so it's really fun to see her in the kitchen. And so Amadou is one of our newer students, which is great because now we have that dynamic of our students teaching each other, and they are pulling the spice nuts out of the oven. We have been a spice nut factory for the last few weeks. We're launching them for shipping nationwide. We have a co-brand, it's like a whole business side of things that suddenly we're making like 500 pounds of spice nuts, which has made the space smell so delicious. It's the truth. Which actually I saw one of the questions in the chat was about the type of cuisine. I think it was Frank asked the type of cuisine. Mm-hmm. We say that our cuisine is New American, prepared by New Americans. The idea is that the menu is made up of things that are eminently familiar, as our culinary director is from like the American South, like that's really his heritage in terms of cooking. And the students bring whole new flavor profiles and approaches to things. So our menu has always been kind of a conversation between those two within the structure of what do our students need to know how to do in order to graduate? So what are the things that are going to make them better candidates for a job than culinary school graduates? And so it's a bit of a dance, but it means that we are all constantly learning. Like the spices on the nuts are part of that education of learning, like what is the flavor profile that works here, and what do other cultures do in terms of mixing spices?
Wow. Okay, let me get to the next one. Here we go. Okay.
So this is one of our new initiatives is we are having so this is Ruslan, who is our first culinary leadership fellow. Ruslan graduated he's an asylum seeker from Russia. He graduated from the program a year and a half ago. And what we decided was that we are really excited when we place students in jobs and we watch them grow and succeed. But what would also be really great is if we could kind of put a little bit of fuel behind that, and maybe we could start placing people in leadership roles. So that maybe it meant spending more time at Emma's Torch, having more responsibilities. But what would it look like to have one of our graduates be a sous chef and be responsible for making hiring decisions or making decisions around how do we create a welcoming environment? And so Ruslan is our very first leadership fellow. We had an application process. Our graduates had to get letters of recommendation from past employers. It was pretty rigorous, and Ruslan's just joined us, and he'll be with us for 6 months before we hopefully help him take a quantum leap forward with his career.
That's wonderful. Yum. That looks so good. What is that?
This is I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, which is bad because I'm South African and it's inspired by South African dishes. It's a boerewors biscuit breakfast sandwich. I keep kosher, so I've never tasted this, but it's something that I think speaks to that dynamic for Alex, who's our culinary director. He used to be the head chef at Blue Smoke, and he is very passionate about biscuits and about breakfast sandwiches and about how do you create something that is delicious, wholesome, and filling and made with joy. And so he did a lot of research into how could you riff on this in a way that's more attuned to the types of places where our students are coming from and what are the types of flavors that could go into it. And so it's one of our new menu items. We just opened less than a week ago with this new menu for the new cafe model. So that's I think it was actually our best seller on opening day as well.
Well, I told you my friend came in today and ordered the Shakshuka Sandwich, which sounds absolutely delicious. Tell us about this.
It most certainly is. So we have Umu once again. This is like a fixation of mine that I've had for a while. I love that we do culinary training for what's called back of house in the restaurants. And I think there's a lot of dignity there. So it's not born out of I think it's an art form, it's a science, it's an amazing career. However, if you look at pay disparities, you often see that the back of house roles don't earn as much as front of house. And there's really different dynamics because of it, which become complicated in the industry. And so I had a bee in my bonnet that I wanted our students to learn how to also be the baristas at the cafe, take the orders, use the point of sale system. Because even if they never do any of those things again, I wanted them to realize that they could. And I love coming into the cafe over the last week or so, because I'll come in to get my coffee and it's Umu or it's Fanta or it's another one of our students who's rocking it at the point of sale system, who's speaking with confidence, who's being loud because the kitchen is very loud. And that to me is really important. And I'm hopeful it'll lead to even more confidence and job opportunities going forward.
You're really providing them with such great skills, including self-esteem, financial wellness, self-care. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about the spoons in the background? I mean, I know that's your trademark. And also, I did want to ask you about the name. I read about it on the site, and I wanted you to tell everyone about Emma's Torch as the name, how you chose it.
Sure. So the spoons and the plates, we are very much grateful for the support of our funders and our supporters and community members. And so the spoons are engraved with the names of foundations and major donors who helped us get to this point. And so we're always excited when we can put another spoon on the wall. And the plates are, we used to do for graduation dinners that our students would cook alongside a visiting guest chef. and we've had the editor of the New York Times wine section. We've had James Beard Award with all these amazing, like, people that I had read about in magazines walked into our restaurant. And so we had them sign plates with little notes to our students, and that we display up there. So it's also, and then we have, which you can't see in this photo, pictures of past graduates up on the wall where just the students can see it as a way of just, you know, you're not alone, you have a community, which I think ties into our name a little bit. I'm a very big nerd, and I really admired Emma Lazarus, who wrote the poem in the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." And what I loved about her was that her story is crazy. She was this woman who just didn't take no for an answer, and she was asked to write something that encapsulates what it means to be American, because that was the idea behind the Statue of Liberty. It had nothing to do with refugees, it had nothing to do without, like, none of that. And she used this opportunity to completely reframe what it meant to be American, to live up to our ideals in a way that's we don't always get there, but it's truly aspirational. And so I felt that it would be a nice reminder of what our values are. And so we have up in the classroom, we have the poem up on the wall as a reminder that our students are truly welcome, and that in welcoming them, we're made better. And so it's not an act of charity, it's an act of welcoming, of throwing open our arms, which is really important to us.
Wow, that's great. Tikkun olam, as I say in Hebrew, truly healing the world. That's what you're doing. Tell us about this.
Oh, I love this picture. Sierra, who is, this is so great. Sierra, who sent these photos, is the newest member of our team, and she's the one leading this stretch. And the storage it's been, for the whole world, we are very fortunate, but it's been a very crazy time, and has led us to things like suddenly we have laptops in our kitchen, and we have all these different moving parts, and some things are online and some things are in person, and it can get very overwhelming and confusing very fast. Like, is today a sitting day? Is today a standing day? And Sierra, I think she's a licensed social worker, and has really found a way to infuse that confusion, those moments of discomfort, with a lot of joy. And so this is a photo of having everybody do a big stretch. I think this was right after we had just gone over new safety protocols, which can be scary and overwhelming. And I think that the important thing is that we always remember we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. At the end of the day, we're just trying to make some delicious food together. And I think reminding the students of that too is important, because the goal is for them to make mistakes. We try and push them to make the mistakes as frequently as possible. And so this is one of those photos of just some happiness and joy. And we can see Lee, and this is Fanta, getting ready to stretch and take on the rest of the day.
Do they bring their own dishes into the kitchen? Like, do they introduce you to their own recipes?
They do. And it used to be so nice when we could do our formal graduation dinners, our students took over the menu and would bring, and it was always interesting because we just tell them, like, cook whatever you want. And there's always a story there. And so now we talk about food, and whoever's making family meal can bring their own recipes and dishes. And we're looking for ways to replicate that experience more, because it is so special. And now you have Chef Alex, who's really just really an amazing educator and chef. And so this is him welcoming in, I think this was on our very first day back. So welcoming in Umu, Fanta, and Lee, who we hadn't seen, well, we had seen on Zoom, but we hadn't seen in person since we had closed up in March, and kind of re-welcoming them to what we've been calling Emma's Torch 2.0 is going to be, and making sure that they felt comfortable.
It looks like a really nice facility. I mean, how big is this space?
It's not a huge space. It's I think it's about 1,500 square feet. It's a small New York restaurant, and we're very lucky. Rachel Ray actually did the restaurant design. So it doesn't always have these kind of prep tables, but we decided that we weren't going to seat people inside anyways. So why don't we expand our kitchen space and have our students take over the whole space, which has been fun. And here's them. Oh my goodness, they diced so much butternut squash, which is important because repetition of knife skills. And this was for the first time we did rethink meals. So I think this was for a batch of about 400. which was fun and exciting, but also very repetitive. And so we all got a little bit goofy by the end of it for our photos.
I think that's the last one. That was fun. I'm so glad we have those pictures.
I'm glad you asked for them. It's fun. I wasn't there today because my daughter, and so I'm excited tomorrow I'll get to see everyone. So this is a nice reminder.
Can you also, are there other businesses like yours around America? I know there is Tannabelle in Brooklyn, which is not quite the same, but she does hire refugees to cook as well.
Yeah, and actually she's hired from Hannah's a good friend. I was actually, it was her birthday, so just texting with her. Hannah's a dear friend, and she's
conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, Tannabelle's wonderful. There's Eat Off Beat, which are both for-profit companies, which is amazing and wonderful, but their focus is more on the business side of it, while ours is on education. So actually for both Manal, who's the founder of Eat Off Beat, and Hannah, we've connected them with graduates of ours, which has been just a nice friendship from people with shared ideas. There are programs not dissimilar to ours, but across the country, and the truth is that ours has benefited immensely from learning from those programs. So one of the first people who continues to be one of my mentors runs a bakery in the DC area that trains adults with developmental challenges. And while those are very different populations, the structures, how you set up a nonprofit that also has a revenue arm, all of those things, and how do you handle the many challenges that come with it? So their founder is someone who I reach out to frequently. And there are a couple of programs, and what's nice is you would think like, oh, is there going to be competition? Do people feel weird and territorial? I get to talk with people whose jobs and life goals are to help better people in the world. And so there's usually very little ego and a lot of sharing and helping, and especially throughout the pandemic, a lot of Zoom calls and just checking in with each other, which is really nice.
That is. And what are your plans for the future in terms of evolving, or like your big dreams for Emma's Torch?
Yeah, I think it's a strange time to be dreaming big, since we just want to stay afloat. But I think what helps with staying afloat is having that eye on the prize and a future vision. I can share that the day that we shut down was also the day that we signed a contract with Citi Field to have a concession stand for the Mets baseball season. So we're hopeful there'll be baseball again.
Gosh.
We have tons of weddings we're supposed to cater, and people will get married again. And I think the big picture is we'd like to bring this work to other communities. We'd like to broaden our partnerships and see, like, you know, I joke a lot, like I've made so many mistakes along the way. I think that I could share that wisdom so that we could do it better next time. And so hopefully we can build on that kind of hard-earned knowledge, and just continue to expand, especially if we're hopefully going to be welcoming in at least 125,000 new people starting in the new year. Yeah. Like let's be ready for them. Let's show them who we really are through work like this.
That's a great dream. We have the same dream. We have the same exact dream at Neighbors for Refugees and at Welcome Home. I'd like to open up the floor to everyone in the conversation. Feel free to ask Kerry a question directly, any of you, while you can. Okay. Does anyone have a question?
I will. Hi, Kerry. Jamel again.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I missed part of the conversation because my connection went down, but I'm back.
Oh no.
So if you've already addressed this, I apologize. I'll get the answer from someone else. How do you work with all the different languages when you're doing instruction? How do you do that?
So it's a huge challenge, and we are very lucky to live in like the golden age of technology for translation. So the way it ends up working every time without fail is I'll be talking to a student and they will apologize to me for not speaking English, at which point I have to explain to them how I'm the one who should be apologizing, because they speak so many different languages and know so much. And we have so many students who speak French. I've been trying, I don't have a brain for languages. But what's beautiful about the culinary industry is that there's also physicality to it. And so sometimes we'll be trying to explain something using Google Translate, using different translators, trying to get it across. And then it's just like, actually, why don't we show each other this? And so we encourage our students to use their cell phones, take a video, take a picture. I'll also say that there's so many wonderful resources for English classes available that our students really do invest in themselves. And we just try and demonstrate patience and support for that, because they bring so much, and the fact that they're also trying to learn a new language, it just makes us want to be more patient and understanding.
Is it ever an issue as they go out looking for jobs and doing interviews and stuff, if their English has to be at a certain level, I'm assuming, to get hired?
It does, and the big challenge there is also confidence. One of our very early students, actually, we almost didn't accept into the program because what we ask for is for a functional level of English, which only means if I show you something, can you follow along? You don't actually have to. I don't need to hear a word of English from you. But we had a prospective student who was like, I don't think this is going to work. And I ended up talking to our caseworker at the IRC, who said, no, Kerry, like, just give her a shot. And of course, like, I balanced towards like, okay, great. Like, this woman's incredible. Let's bring her on. And it turns out that it was just, she was shy, and her English, she really did struggle with English, but knowing that meant that I could reach out to employers and I could say, hey, I have someone who, she speaks Dari. I don't know if you have anyone on your team who speaks Dari, but if you give her a knife and put her in a station, and you're going to be wowed. And what's amazing is this is somebody who graduated from our pilot program in 2017, who's now a supervisor at Sahadi's, and just doing an amazing job. Like, the letters that I get from her employer every so often are just like, this woman's incredible. We try and send them more people so they can report to her. And so for me, it was a good lesson, and it's a case point that I bring up with employment partners, because it is hard. The interview part is really hard, but our hope is that we can give them a nudge to give them that chance to show them the skills.
That's good.
Sahadi's is my favorite place in Brooklyn. So.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I love that.
Hmm.
How did you form your relationship with the Brooklyn Public Library? How did that come about?
Yeah, I joke a lot that this journey has been filled with like very weird confluences of events, and sometimes I don't know how this happened, but we had an article that came. There was a lot of press about us when we opened the restaurant. We were very fortunate because a number of reporters wrote about us, and that press begets press. And I didn't think much about it until I got a call from someone who was the general counsel at the library, and said, crazy idea. I know you just opened a restaurant, but what do you think about this? And I vividly remember turning to Alex, our culinary director, and saying, wouldn't that be so funny if we opened a cafe at the library? I had also just told him I was pregnant. So the timing, we had just opened a restaurant. I was pregnant. This was not the best time to be doing this. And what I love about Alex is that it went from, this would be crazy, but crazy enough that it might just work. So we opened in the library 4 months later. And we can't wait to be back there. So it's really special to be in a community space like that. The volume of people we see, the type, like, just, it's a nice environment. So we're looking forward to that again.
And you said you keep kosher. Does that impact what you serve at all? Or do you
not really, now that I'm not cooking the food.
Anything like that? I'm just curious. Halal, kosher?
No. So halal, what we'll do is, the restaurant isn't halal or kosher, but Alex, this is like all chefs, they live to feed people. So whenever we have students who will only eat halal, Alex makes sure that there's always food for them. If that means going to buy halal meat, that's what he does. Especially for graduation dinners, or if we have like the families of our graduates, we'll have a family celebration with them. And so we always make sure to be cognizant of dietary needs and preferences. It's not just about like the rules of it, but also whenever we hear like, oh, a student's favorite food is X, we'll make a point of trying to make that or think about that or talk about that, which is just a nice way of bringing people together.
Absolutely. Does anyone have a question? Anyone else? Alan?
I would like to say a few things. First of all, it's really nice to meet you. You've just been a legend as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And it's really great to hear that you're back on your feet as an organization, and that you found a way to move forward. And you know, I wish the best to you and your your associates and your colleagues and your students. This is just terrific.
Thank you.
I look forward to letting our folks know, our clients know that you're doing stuff again. And I guess I want to reminisce a little bit, not too much at length, but you've spoken a little bit about watching your students grow and develop confidence and things like that. And I knew that Emma's Torch existed before I met our first client who would be one of your students. But I didn't really know very much about Emma's Torch, frankly. My first experience of Emma's Torch was as the gateway for a family to be able to get their first apartment. So Catholic Charities referred Veronica and her family from Nigeria to us. Yeah, they were about to get evicted from a kitchen, actually, that they were living in a church, because the church was going to renovate the kitchen, going to wind up in a public shelter. And Catholic Charities didn't want that, obviously. And they asked if we could help them move from New York to Jersey City and find them an apartment, which is really difficult to do unless someone has a job, And she had just started at Emma's Torch. And I think I wrote to Edric at the time, and I asked him just to send me a letter stating her income, so that I could bring that to the landlord to prove that she was going to be able to support herself and pay the rent. And so from that letter, she was able to get her first apartment and move her 3 kids in with her, out of a kitchen into an apartment while she worked in a kitchen. And it's just an amazing thing. So this is her beginning in so many ways. Now she's in the same apartment. We're in touch all the time. She's trying to start her own business. She's gone from about to be homeless to looking for a space where she can open a bakery in Jersey City. She sends cakes all over the place. She's a great marketer for herself. She's working in a commercial kitchen at a synagogue here in Jersey City. And it's a beautiful thing. And she's not the only one. I think that 8 or 10 of our clients have gone through Emma's Torch, and even those who don't wind up staying in the restaurant trade, are different people when they come out of the experience that they've had at culinary school. So thank you, and I look forward to learning more about the programming that you're offering now and how we can be a part of it.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear that about. Sorry, that makes me all emotional. We have. It's funny. I get used to you write about grant applications or anything we got 100 graduates, but it's not 100 graduates. I remember Veronica's first day. I remember working with Edric on the letter. I remember connecting with it's exciting to hear, and it's always nice to know as our students continue on, whether or not they stay in the culinary industry. It's relevant, obviously, and we are interested, but it's always just nice to know what they use this opportunity to do, whatever it is. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our students were really reluctant to start because they didn't think that they could take 2 trains from Jersey City to Brooklyn. They just couldn't imagine. They couldn't fathom it.
Yeah, that's why we want to open in urban places so we can be closer.
I know. Have you ever thought about branching out? I mean, we have a number of refugees up here in Westchester who are pretty good cooks, and they've talked to us about starting businesses, just like Alan was mentioning. But they don't have the experience. They're good cooks, but they don't have the experience running a restaurant or doing a catering business. They don't have the food safety training that you need to do it. And since you've gone virtual, is there ways that any of our people up here in Westchester could somehow long distance become part of your program? And maybe only do a couple weeks in your shop, or a couple days a week, and then the other days are long distance? Or
so we are thinking about how do we, there's always more demand than what we can supply, especially in terms of the in-person training. And there has been a lot of outreach there's been a lot of outreach from a couple of different communities wanting us to open locations there, Westchester County in particular. And we're trying to figure out, I think that we had planned on using 2020 as the year to map out that growth strategy and kind of what we would do. This year I think we're just going to pretend it didn't happen. But it's the challenge that we have in terms of, like, even for students who can't, we often have students who want to participate, but they can't commit to 40 hours a week. And as understanding as we want to be, we have to make sure that we can realistically help people find jobs. And so that's where we had some level of reluctance to making sure that there's a shared standard of what it means to be an Emma's Torch graduate, in terms of, like, how many hours have you spent in the kitchen, how much, because a lot of this knowledge requires repetition, it requires that physicality. But it is something we're trying to figure out what it looks like. We've just, we're completing a licensing deal with another organization about licensing our curriculum. And so if that turns into something that's replicable, then that's a way that we could potentially be able to provide this program and this opportunity to more people, because we hate saying no.
I mean, it's not just our refugees here. I'm also involved with a group here called the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck, and they had a program where they taught people to cater and work at catering, work at restaurants, but it was at a lower level. But they have a huge immigrant groups, not refugees per se, and there probably is a fairly good sized demand there too. I mean, so it sounds like the thing that you're doing is, and I can imagine it's hard to replicate. You're such a big part of your success that we'd have to clone you a couple times.
I'm always standing in the way.
I don't think that's true. But it would be something that, making connections up here and seeing whether or not there's, if you think about branching out, and maybe there's some way that we could work with you and may connect you with the CRC too. That might be a way to maybe do a coalition of groups to help that happen.
Kerry Frank is our president. And you probably were in touch with each other when we were speaking a few months ago, and we worked together on grants. So wanted to make sure.
But I, like you, just get in the way of most things. So I try to stand back and let others do it.
I'd like, Kerry, what are the advantages and challenges of being in New York City? How does New York City come into play in every single way here? Because you're in the heart of it. It's expensive.
Yeah,
or expensive place to be, but it's an amazing place to be.
It is. I am, I think, the world's most reluctant New Yorker. We moved here in part because of Emma's Torch and in part because of my husband, his grad school. And I'm the first to admit I was kicking and screaming that it's too big, it's too much, it's scary. I grew up in Maryland, love Washington, D.C. This is too much for me. But there's something amazing about that challenge. I mean, New York is, it sounds really trite, but if you can make it anywhere, New York's going to be the place that you really have to prove it. And we've kind of leaned into that. Like when we were looking for our full-time restaurant space after we were in Red Hook, which is like this really nice corner of Brooklyn. It's very quiet. It's a sleepy area. It's an amazing community. And we were looking at locations for the restaurant, and we said, you know what, if we're going to do it, let's do it. And so we chose one of the most populated restaurant communities with a lot of opinions in Brooklyn. We were in Carroll Gardens, where we opened, and 2 weeks later, the restaurant next door was named one of the best one of the top 10 Bon Appetit restaurants in America. Like, we really leaned into it. And I think that obviously there are people like this everywhere, but the sheer concentration of people whose attitude is just, let's do it, that I've gotten to meet in New York has been really incredible. And so as much as our board chair teases me because all I want to do is, open an MS Torch in DC. But we've got to have that New Yorker attitude of like, let's just do it. Let's stop talking. Let's do it. Let's get it done. And how can I help? And that's been amazing to see. And I think there's also that shared attitude that goes for our students as well. By being in the New York area, there's kind of that same energy, which I really appreciate.
I love that. That's a great place to end. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And your students, because of you, will. And thank you so much, Kerry. And thank you to everyone for coming. And please stay tuned for future Zooms on our website, neighborsforrefugees.org. Thank you to everyone who came from Neighbors for Refugees. And thank you, Kerry, again. We look forward to doing more with you in the future.
Great job. Great job.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Brodie.
Bye.
Good job.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Kerry. Thank you.